computer. And let's go live with the alchemy of true forgiveness. Absolutely beautiful. Lovely. All right, guys, thank you very much for coming. For those of you who are live on the call, I'll take your questions at the end. And for those of you who are following us live on Facebook, welcome, welcome, welcome. The teaching today is called The Alchemy of True Forgiveness. And we're talking about some of the mechanics associated with real forgiveness, with real ultimate spiritual true release and restoration, that kind of forgiveness, not just the get over it forgiveness, not just the change my story about what happened kind of forgiveness, but utter complete renewal. That's what we're talking about. And I'm going to be delivering some teachings from the Sovereign Way. I may have time to show you a visual model of what I'm talking about. And I'm also going to point to some biblical truths, because the greatest gift in my mind, the greatest gift of the Bible, and in fact, its main message, and the most powerful of all of the spells contained in that book, in fact, the most important thing that you can embody from any ancient spiritual teachings is this one absolute truth that will never change. Nobody is immune to the need for release and forgiveness while incarnate as a human being. And nobody is unforgivable or irredeemable. And what's more, you need to restore your innocence in your own self-awareness now. And with that also comes a release of all others and all actual occurrences from the meaning of the stories that you've spun around what's happened in your actualized life. So why am I stressing this importance now? What is it about releasing and importance and releasing and forgiving now that is so important? Well, as you may or may not have noticed, the world is changing very, very rapidly. And we haven't seen the worst of it yet, nor have we arrived at the core of what we're collectively detoxing. There are wobbly times ahead in the truth expansion. What's going on at the minute is a spiritual phenomenon that's been spoken about for eons, and we're all aware of the shift that's going on. And if you want to participate in the omnipresence of grace and miracle that is life in the kingdom, then you need to have the ability to see divine order in what is. And if you've been following the teaching series called The Veiled Obstructions, you may have seen one of our episodes called Turning Agony into Majesty. And the fundamental teaching in that one episode is that if you have the ability to see divine order in what is, there you are holding open the floodgates to receive the grace that restores all. That's the true alchemy, and that's what shifts things. But that participation in the omnipresence of grace is not possible when your awareness is still influenced by traumas and stories of old, of who did what to us and why they probably did that. Our experience of truth and our experience of all our life is warped by our perspective when that perspective is formed by pain. And when it's formed by the subconscious belief that something needs to be done in order to restore balance to the world. So you see, seeing that something needs to be done in order to restore balance is the same thing as seeing that what is not good enough. So there's a very subtle resistance that you're putting up there to receiving the grace that you are saying and knowing and believing is there for you, but that you are not able to receive as long as you are in the creative claim that what is not correct. You get that? So the subconscious belief that something needs to be done in order to restore balance to the world may well be the thing that's preventing you from graceful and easy and fluid forgiveness. Think of it this way: you trying to participate in the miracle of grace while you're still holding on to unforgiveness and judgment and criticism, let's be honest, is a lot like trying to compose a sweet piano overture while you have Black Sabbath playing in the background. It's very similar to that. So now is the time to forgive and release the hurt. But there are 3 questions that we need to answer in order to make that happen. Because I know you've been trying to forgive for a long time. I know you've been intending to forgive. I know you've been intending to let it go and move on. And I know that you're also finding yourself back in patterns, back in cycles, and wondering, why is it that I've gone down this rabbit hole? Why is it that I'm looking at this thing again? Well, I'm going to address 3 questions that I think is going to, I know will give some clarity around this. Wonderful. I see your questions. Thank you very much. I'll take those at the end. The first question I want to address out of these 3 is, number 1, why is it so hard to let it go? What's the actual mechanism of what's occurring in my system of being that's preventing me from letting go of something that I've decided I'm done with? The second question is, what's the real reason that even though you have decided to move on from an experience, the whispers of bitterness and regret keep striking false notes in your heart? So there's a difference there. Number 1, why is it hard to let go? And number 2, why are certain things extra sticky? Why do we get that twinge, those whispers of sourness and regret? And then the third question, how do we actually move on? What is the protocol? There must be a system, there must be a way, there must be a thing, there must be a how-to. And the reason I say that, and this is biblical, is because in all things, there is order. There is order in all things, even in chaos, which means with proper sequence and with proper protocol, you can apply attention and energy in a systematic way that gracefully releases the ties that bind you to the thing that's causing you agony. I'm going to answer these 3 questions specifically. And the reason I've chosen these is because these are the ones that we receive from our clients again and again. Why? What is it? And the how-to question, how do we actually move on? That's the easiest one. So I'll address that last. But the first 2 need a little bit of examination. So here we go. Number 1, why is it so hard to move on? Why am I not letting go of this thing? Well, let's put it this way. Even though you've put some time and some energy and some intention into getting over something or changing your story around something, the so-called traumatic event, perhaps, it doesn't mean it's actually left your system. And there are many reasons for that, predominantly a psychoneurosomatic wholeness around what's gone on. And it's not just the event in itself, it's the entire coordinates of consciousness of who you've become. I'll explain that a little bit better. But suffice to say now, it's got less to do with you than you think. I'm going to think now of the subtle energy system in your body as software. It's your vibration, your feeling, your emotion, your brain waves, your heart waves, and your point of attraction. Imagine your electromagnetic output, your whole sort of vibrational stamp that goes before you into the quantum world and says, this is who I am and what I stand for and what I say is real and what I will allow as actual in my vibrational universe. Think of that as your software. And think of what you think about what you know what is. Think about that as the data. So the data that makes up the subtle energy software is your cellular consciousness. The codings, the stories, the narratives that are written into your control panel about what is allowed to be so in your quantum experience. Well, your software, your subtle energy body, picks up on whatever is going on in your surroundings, in your prehension. That's the perceivable energy fields that you're surrounded by. And the software then informs your molecular hardware in your body of what's going on. That's your prehension. Now, here's one truth. Our experience of everything in life depends entirely on what we believe about the information that we're prehending, and how we respond energetically in our subtle energy system to what we believe about it, and the information that's passed on then to the molecular hardware, where our body chemistry alters in response to what we feel about what we think. And then what happens in the body because of that chemistry. So in other words, what this means is that when we experience stress or anxiety in our body from something that's triggered an unforgiven trauma, this is the physical product of a chemical response to an energetic response to some data that's running in our consciousness. And when we change the data, everything changes. It's like pushing the first domino in an incredibly complex mandala of dominoes. But what is recorded in your cellular consciousness as trauma depends entirely on chemistry. What anyone experiences as trauma at any given time depends on the amount of adrenaline in the blood at that time. You see, the body is designed to record experiences that trigger high levels of adrenaline as traumatic. And this is a brilliant biological response that kept all kinds of species safe for many, many millennia. And this is why two people can experience the same circumstance, but one story is written as traumatic and the other story is written as transformative. But it also means that there is some randomness to what is recorded as trauma in your story. There is some randomness to this because we don't store adrenaline in our body by choice. It's a response. It's a biological response. And we can see from Pavlov's dogs, for example, and other sort of behavioral experiments like that, that you can create false limbic associations between different sensory input. Imagine if you'd heard a loud bang one day and that had elevated your adrenaline levels. And at that point, a friend of yours turned up and said something mean. Now, this betrayal is more likely to have been recorded as trauma for you because of the high levels of adrenaline in your body due to that bang that had randomly happened. So the problem, therefore, is that the thing that you think you're trying to forgive is probably not actually a thing you're trying to forgive. You may very well have gotten over it already, but there may still be an arbitrary limbic association between what you're prehending in your energetic universe and the way your body responds. The thing is as well that entire cultures are actually linked intergenerationally in this way, that we pass down stories about what to fear and what to do to avoid these threats, and we begin to know it innately. And this is what we call collective consciousness. So when a trauma code is recorded in the DNA, it's associated with the production of stress hormones, right? So we understand that. So when you experience something like a loud bang, your cells give the fear signal. The brain picks up that signal and responds by producing fight or flight hormones. The body then responds by pulling blood from the vital organs and pushing it into the extremities to prepare for fight, flight, or freeze. And your body chemistry is then changed, which means, get this is important, it means that your brain will put a linear narrative to the vibration it prehends, and it will form a story around what's going on. Get this, get that. That's really, really important. Your thoughts are not linear. You don't own thoughts and you don't produce thoughts. Thoughts are quantum. Thoughts exist in a superposition state until your vibration collapses the superpotentiality of any given thought, and that thought collapses and becomes the beginning of a string of narrative. So that means that the story you find yourself telling over and over again may not actually be something that you haven't let go of. It may simply be an arbitrary linear narrative that matches the particular frequency that you find yourself in. Get that? I'm asking for the people live on the call to nod if you understand that. Good, good. So this means that you may have much less forgiving and releasing to do than you think. There may actually just be a case of needing to do some simple energy work to dissolve some links between emotional states and mental narrative. So that when you're waking up at 3 a.m. and you find yourself telling that story you wish you could get over and just forgive your mother-in-law or the dude in 4th grade or whatever it might be, it may actually be that a far easier and more graceful solution than attempting to forgive something that doesn't exist is actually to do the energy work to shift that narrative. I sat with a client this morning. She has struggled with anxiety for a very, very long time. And the issue for her really is that she experienced a trauma aged 12. Before she was 12 and this trauma occurred, she lived a life of great hope, great faith, lots of celebration, a wonderful religious life, a beautiful relationship with the divine. And then when the trauma happened, after that point, all religious activity stopped. And she had no standpoint for faith anymore after that traumatic experience. So what occurred then was an error in her mind. When a trauma is triggered in her body, when anxiety is triggered in her body, the mindset flips from God is with me to God is not with me. And so the result is that she goes into anxiety because her viewpoint is trained for despair, not hope. So this is not a rational thing. This is not about logic. This isn't even about emotion. She doesn't have the emotion of fear because there's nothing she's really afraid of, but rather her mindset is now inverted. It's seeing the opposite of truth. So this is a simple switch in mindset that we're working on restoring. And it's actually quite simple. Good. So the summary of that is to know that when you're in fear, the stories that go on in the ruminative mind have actually nothing to do with a trauma that needs to be released or stagnant emotions that need to be released. Often it's just the narrative that your brain is associating with this particular vibration. Yes? Good. Good. Of course, some experiences in our life come at us completely uninvited, completely unsolicited, completely unexpected, and we play no conscious part in the actualization of the event. If someone comes up from behind and hits us over the head, that's not something that we have created in form. It's a happening, it's an actualized happening in our life that we're experiencing. But all the questions around how did this happen and what is the meaning of all of this, that is pure story and pure speculation. There is no point in you analyzing all of the potential errors in your behavior or your energy or your thought to try to discover the root cause of why something unexpected occurred. That's a rabbit hole, and it's a rabbit hole out of which it's very, very hard to return. So I'm going to give you this nugget. I'm going to give you permission to stop trying to fix yourself in order to forgive yourself, to stop trying to earn your forgiveness and earn your self-forgiveness, and to stop trying to reframe others so that they earn your forgiveness, because it's impossible. Instead, you're going to hold on to the knowing that you are in the omnipresence of mercy, that immediate infinite mercy is available to you and yours by birthright. And when you embody it, it spills out of you and you forgive by default. So hold on to that. So that's the first question. The first question was why is it so hard to let go? And the answer is because it's in you. It's in the vibration of who and what you've become. It's a part of your prehension system. It's simple to get out of it, though. Here's the second question. Why are some things stickier than others? Isn't it strange? You know, I have been through, just like you, all kinds of traumatic experiences in my life. I have seen horrors, I have felt terrors, I have walked through deep, deep tar pits, and I've gotten lost in the wilderness of the shadows of the valley of the shadows of death. But ultimately, the things that are hardest to get over have nothing to do with the size of the event, but in fact, how close they were to the first moment of wounding. Think of this. There are some things that others would say, wow, that is so awful. You must have been tremendously traumatized by this occurrence that you're describing. It must have taken you years and years to get over this. How terrible. And you're thinking to yourself, perhaps it should have taken me a lot longer than it did. Whereas other things, others might say to you, well, just let it go. That's no big deal. And for some reason, you can't see why you can't let it go. Who would engage in whose hardship is harder conversations? Have you ever had a friend who wants to compare their hardship to yours and wants to remind you that what they've been through is much worse than what you've been through? The thing is, it cannot be measured. It cannot be measured at all, because some things, the reason some things are stickier than others is because it depends entirely on how deep the original trauma code is, how close to your first moment of wounding. These moments are known by some energy practitioners as anchor points, because they validate the original trauma and they stitch it to your life's canvas. So the more of these stitches you have, the more life compounds the projected evidence to validate that story. So in other words, your attention is always on the story then. You keep affirming it. For example, sitting with a therapist week after week, year after year, talking about the same pain. So then forgiveness, or the thing that you're trying to forgive, becomes a focus issue. And you intend to forgive and release it, but the reality of that trauma is so tightly stitched into life that you see it everywhere and you continue to affirm it as a part of who you are. I'm sad to say I've seen tremendous damage done by well-meaning counselors, therapists, and practitioners who are wanting to help you get over the thing, but by the nature of the modality of examining and over-examining and talking and expounding on these things, create the idea that it should be harder to get over than it is. Unfortunately, I've seen damage done even by psychics who will read what's in your energy field, read what's in your psychic field, and then spew it back to you as if it is a genuine trauma point, which you then take, attach, and identify with. The thing is, as we grow up, you see, as we grow up in our life, the stories we tell about who we are become more complex and interwoven, and they begin to interfere with the way we look at everything. We stop looking at things in innocence and we start looking at things in judgment. We validate the stories we've chosen to tell and retell, and we begin to believe the projection of what we're saying into the world. So we project our own unforgiving guilt into the world as a defense mechanism, and then we see the corresponding evidence that the world is out to get us. It takes incredible courage to choose to look at how we've compounded the experience, how we've repeated it time and time again, and to cement it into our knowing of who we are. This is how this person treats me. This is how these people treat me. This is how all those people treat people like us. We may notice all the times that we've lamented and complained, or blamed or lashed out in bitterness. So while we may have no control over what others did to us, who would deny that we've certainly played a part in that suffering? That in a way that the villain of the story had no control over. The villain of the story had no control over our lamentations and complaints, our blaming and our bitterness. These things need forgiveness too. Because if we're trying to forgive a perpetrator in our life, but we ourselves have poured so much of the bitterness or blame, lamentation or complaint into the story, then there is only one thread of the story being forgiven. We need to forgive our own threads of guilt that have been woven into the experience, because otherwise we'll have the feeling of not being able to let it go, because that is an energetic investment in the story. The final question, number 3, is how do I actually release? That is, of course, the big question. That's the $1 million question. What is the proper mechanical protocol for release? Like I said before, there is only order. There is only harmony. There is only unfolding, expansive goodness. That is the only thing that truly exists. All chaos is story. So that means that there is a perfect sequential protocol that you can use for release, for true forgiveness. Let me tell you that there is only one energy in the cosmos that actually transforms pain to love, and we're going to call it grace. On a human level, we consciously tap into grace through Christ. Christ is the knowing of oneself as the anointed one. It's the embodiment and awareness of your higher knowing. It's a state of consciousness that's accessible to all, regardless of what your religious language is. And the tools that we use to initiate true forgiveness are the tools that create and hold the mindset into which that energy of grace flows freely. So it's important here to know that the forgiveness isn't something you are doing, but rather your mastery is in creating and upholding a framework of consciousness that allows that one renewing energy to do what it naturally does. This relationship is a little bit like taking a shower after a long and very painful session digging in the garden. Okay, so use this visualization to see if you can align with this. So on the one hand, you have your knowing of your smelliness, right? Oh, look, I'm covered in dirt. I need a shower. And the knowing of your smelliness, that's what ignites your intention to have a shower. I am filthy. I will have a shower. Yes, that's Christ. The water, which is grace, is what cleans the dirt away. So on the one hand, I know that I need to be cleaned, and the water is the grace that cleans. Your own conscious actions are what initiate and conduct the process that becomes your experience of washing, right? So that's the third element here. So your own conscious actions are what initiate and conduct the process that becomes your experience of washing. So we get that I need to know and intend that I need forgiveness and I need to forgive. But it is not me who does the forgiving. That's grace. But I am the one who initiates and conducts the process of washing. That doesn't mean you do it well. You might, for example, and I've seen this done, not literally, but figuratively. For example, you might look at yourself and go, I'm filthy, I need a shower. And then you might step into the shower, still wearing your filthy clothes, and you might pour bleach over your head, and you might turn the heat all the way up to max. You will get clean, but it will be a horrible experience for you. However, if you know how to set the temperature, and you know which bottle contains the right soap, and you know what part of your body to wash in which order, then the process of cleansing and releasing is fast, efficient, and pleasurable. The energetics of this process of true forgiveness, the true alchemy of true restorative forgiveness, is simple. The energetics of this process are simple, but specific. If you do it in the wrong order, you can end up poking open some wounds that were already healing nicely. I have had a client who ended up coming because she needed to get over a trauma that wasn't a trauma until she was told by someone it was a trauma. Or worse than poking open wounds that were healing nicely, worse, you may even end up forming new traumas out of memories that weren't actually negatively impacting your truth, but do start negatively impacting your truth because they become reclassified as traumas by the effects of your shadow work. So some energies are stickier than others. Some traumas are more established in our identities. And some of our archetypal enemies that we love to hate are really complexly written into our plot line. But it doesn't matter because all of it can be transformed. Whether it's enormous or tiny, whether it's complex or simple, the process is the same, and the energy of grace that does the cleaning is universal. It is universal and transcendent. Your mastery is in learning the simplicity of the process and keeping it to the sequence that works, the sequence, the protocol of energy work that truly releases. Last question, should we rely on time to heal every wound? We can. But time, of course, heals nothing at all. Time just brings more opportunities to see things from new perspectives. If we want fast release, full forgiveness, and deep release from the suffering, then we need to use simple energy techniques in the correct sequence according to biblical protocol. And we need to allow a faith in total restoration, total deliverance, and utterly vital renewal. That's the hardest part sometimes, to allow it to have been done. Now, as our clients know, this isn't theological dogma. This is practical alchemy. This is the transformation of one energy field into another energy field. Forgiveness, you see, is mystical, metaphysical, and physical. And the alignment of these is what brings release. The alignment of the mystical, the metaphysical, and the physical. The alignment of these is what brings release. And that alignment can be chosen and consciously orchestrated with simple energy work, simple metacognition practices, and the correct prayer. If you follow an orderly protocol, the result is very, very fast. Our clients show us this time and time again. So ultimately, true forgiveness means a liberation from all of the after effects of the harm that was once caused by an error code installed in your genetic consciousness. All of the after effects, including those arbitrary limbic associations that occurred because of chemistry. True forgiveness doesn't take away the sacredness of your difficult experiences. It doesn't take away the reality of what you went through, but it does remove the link between the triggers around you and the stress response that you experience when those triggers cross your path. It allows you to be free, you see. It allows you to be free through the experiences that have tied you to the bottom of the lake. I'm going to leave you with this. What would it be like to be truly free? Truly free from the ties that bind, truly free from the stories of old, truly free from your ideas of what could have or should have been. What would it be like to be utterly peaceful when you wake up at 3 a.m. or first thing in the morning, to be able to look into the day with innocence and wonder? Is it worth a shot to learn a way of grace that is practical and real? Is it worth a shot to learn a biblical protocol for true utter, thorough forgiveness? Would it be worth a shot to deep dive into the mechanics of creation and consciousness and know the true spiritual law of overcoming? I say that you must put forgiveness at the top of your list until you know how perfectly forgiven you are and how utterly held you are in the body of mercy, in the body of Christ. When this is so embedded in your knowing of yourself, it cannot help but pour out and spill out of you into your relationships. And that is the frequency that restores all things to perfect divine order. And perfect divine order is what you must be able to see if you are to participate in the reality of the kingdom. Wonderful. Tomorrow, in the Oasis, we're going to be exploring the biblical mystery teachings, and we're going to bathe in the only energy that restores. We're going to be bathing in grace. We're going to be immersing ourselves in the actual mechanics of true forgiveness. We're going to dip our toes into the endlessly deep exploration of what true mercy is. And we're going to taste the release. We're going to do some energy work together to taste the release of what has been. We're going to let that flavor linger in our energy field. And we're going to let it extend as a ripple effect into all things that we do. The Oasis is our incubator for spiritual growth, for high thinkers and mature seekers of truth. And in the Oasis, you'll be joined by a small and intimate group of students of the sovereign way. It's a particular way of interpreting life, a way that reveals incredible hope, and it reveals the balance between mastery and surrender. How much of the forgiveness is yours to do, and how much will occur by default when you do your bit. So if you're interested in that, reach out to us and we'll bring you right in. So for those of you following on the live, thank you very much for watching. Today is the day today is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And for those of you who are on the live call, I will take your questions. Goodbye to everyone live. Good. Let's see, Eleanor.
Thank you.
Yes. Struggle.
Is it possible to hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. Good. I get a little bit confused. It's because I have one screen to be able to listen, and the other one is for looking. So I get a bit confused. But as I wrote, I do struggle with this concept. Not when I think about my private personal life and the things that happened to me in my life, but like when we're talking about, because I have a huge sense of justice, you know that already, and I often struggle to kind of, when you said this thing in the beginning, like we're not supposed to be trying to restore the balance. I feel that is my job to do that on a structural level, not in my life, but like I'm supposed to be speaking for a world in which there is more justice than it is today. So I sometimes feel like perhaps also I'm misinterpreting or I'm misguided, but I don't feel like I'm misguided in my, you know what I mean? Like,
yes, absolutely.
I hear those things. Yeah.
Yes. I'll address that. You are right. You are right. We are called to bring balance, and we are called to restore justice, and we are called to right what's wrong and to bring back what was stolen. We are called to do that, but we cannot do that when our investment is in the brokenness of it. We can only do that when we are detached and in grace and in poise. Because otherwise we're creating from the perspective of brokenness and not from the perspective of divine order. So let me see if I can quickly think of an example here. Well, this does come back to the pray while smoking alchemy thing here. And turning agony into majesty. We're not saying that we are not supposed to restore order. We're not saying that. We're saying we mustn't declare that order must be restored before divinity can be present. So there's a subtle difference there. Because if we can say divinity is present in this broken thing here, then we're claiming truth into it and it can become unbroken. As opposed to saying, oh, just ignore that broken thing, it's probably fine. Which is that's passivity.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's a good. Thank you for that metaphor, because that helps. Because otherwise, it sounds to me a bit like nihilism, perhaps, or like, yeah, we shouldn't be doing anything in the world because who cares?
Right.
And that irritates me when I hear that. But I understand that's not what you're saying. But it's a bit like if I have this cup and it's broken, and I put like the gold, what is it, what do you call, they called it the Japanese thing. Anyway,
Yes.
I love that image anyway. So that's what we're doing, not like, oh, this is broken, so I'm gonna throw it away and get another one that's whole.
Right.
Yeah.
And not saying it isn't broken and using it anyway and getting covered in hot coffee because we're denying the fact that it's broken. You're right. What we're doing is we're saying it's broken. It is what it is. Here, put that gold vein through it. Now it's better for having been broken.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. It is extremely important, because this is who is creating the resolution. Who is the one forgiving? Is it the little Eleanor who has a story about the justice of the world, who's going to go out there with her placards and her, fiery torches and demands that they sort themselves out? Or is it Eleanor the Christ, who is anointed and ordained with a divine purpose to make the world a better place,
Yeah, and also I think that to realize that, okay, I have this cup and it's broken, and the gold, it's not really me. I'm not the one filling it with the gold. I'm just kind of facilitating that to happen.
Yes.
By doing the things I'm supposed to be doing. It's not like I'm sitting there and doing the thing. Like.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So.
Okay. Cool.
Good. We'll go into more tomorrow. Yeah. We'll tomorrow. Sorry.
Yeah. See you tomorrow.
Wicked. Yeah. See you tomorrow. We'll go through the actual biblical protocol for release, and it's a good one, right?
Should I bring my Bible? I'm staying at my parents' place this week.
Yes. Bring it with you.
Yeah. Cool. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Wonderful.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Matt.